And you don't have to, and you can be pro-peace in the Middle East and have an empathy in your heart for the Palestinians and still support a two-state solution, and still support the idea that Israelis and Palestinians need to work together. And so that's the story I keep telling. The last issue I wanted to show is we had a memorial ceremony at the embassy in May. I mean, firstly, I'm sure people at Telfed know that 87 South Africans who have moved to Israel over the years have died and were killed in Sahel defending Israel over the generations. But one Israeli representative, the Kabat, our security officer at our embassy 40 years ago in 1975, was murdered. And so to mark the 40th anniversary of that event, we established a garden in the back of the embassy. And early in 2016, in fact, on Yom HaZikaron, next to it, we're going to put up a plaque with the 87 names of the South African holding to Israel. We think that the Embassy of Israel in Pretoria is another correct place to remember those young men and young women who keep us safe here in Israel, and with their very lives connect Israel and South Africa. So which one are you? I mean, I think that I've given away who I am in terms of half empty or half full. Are things perfect? They're not. Can things be the way they are between Israel and Canada, between Israel and South Africa? I don't think they can. But can they be 10% or 15% better than they are today? Are they better than you thought before you came here tonight? I think they are. And that's what we're working at the embassy. And by telling the story this way, it opens up the opportunity for even more growth. Well, we can whinge and we can talk about what there isn't and how the South Africans vote in the UN or this way or that way. And there's a time and a place to do that. And it's important to do that. But I think that if we come out and emphasize what there is, which is again, much more than some people would like there to be, and why it's good for South Africa and good for Israel, we have a better chance of succeeding. And so here are ways to connect with us. I showed you that I was on Facebook and Twitter. If you want to follow me or the embassy, those are the different addresses. Again, I saw that this is a big Twittering audience. I get that. But so if you're interested, we're out there and you can join the masses and hundreds of thousands, there's not hundreds of thousands, of people who are interacting with us. And so if anybody has any comments or questions or want to disagree with my whole thesis, I'm happy to hear. So thanks very much.
You mentioned that some of the Christian churches are from Israel. So who is behind the BDS and all the discrimination that's going on against Israel?
I think that there's a very small, very loud, very scary Muslim minority. Not all the Muslims in South Africa. And by the way, Muslims in South Africa are 2% or 1.5% of South Africans. Well over 95% of South Africans are Christian. But there's a tiny, small group that make a lot of noise. And they think that by scaring people, that by threatening, by breaking up concerts at a university recital, or by bashing students who go on study trips to Israel and to the West Bank, or by boycotting Woolworths, that's going to somehow take South Africa in a better path. I think that more South Africans than not are not interested in that path and understand that that's not moving South Africa forward. The politics of the Western Cape, because most Muslims live in the Western Cape, and the fact that that's the only province in South Africa that the ANC doesn't control, makes it a little more edgy in the Western Cape. And so the crazy BDS nicks, extremists, put a head of a pig inside a supermarket. But who does that? That's not South African values. That's not building the future of that country. It's not the position of the South African government. Certainly not the position of almost everybody that I've interacted with. And so I think that the right way to go about business is to do our business and to talk about positive agendas, to talk about creating jobs, to talk about scholarships for South Africa, something that was South African students at Israeli universities. Talking about Israeli culture and how it intersects with people who are interested in culture in South Africa. And not let them, that tiny, small, noisy minority, lead the agenda. They don't get to decide. They're not entitled to.
But it's a small, tiny majority has a very strong influence on the government. Minority.
Well, they try to make a lot of noise. And they tried to influence the government not to close off relations with Israel. And the government said no. And they tried to stop trade. And they tried to get Woolworths to stop doing business with Israel. And they keep failing, friends. They keep failing. They're the losers. They're the ones not succeeding. It's our job, push them to the corner. Don't pay attention to them. Don't let them lead the way. Don't let them determine how we act. But we just do the right thing. We do good things. We create opportunities. We sell. Israel is now, these days, a world leader in cyber, right? A Prime Minister talks all the time about how Beersheba is becoming a world center of cyber because of Shmona Matayim and all of these other units that are coming out of Tzahal. And because we don't have a choice, we've become a superpower. We really are, guys. We're a tiny little country, but in certain niche areas, cyber, water, certain areas of irrigation, we're world powers. And if we emphasize those issues and how we can be useful and helpful, I'm telling you that from my experience, in 4 years in a Muslim country in Azerbaijan, and 2 years in a complex environment, let's be diplomatic, that is South Africa, people are listening. People want to hear what Israel has to offer, and so I'm telling the story again and again and again. Sir.
How do you gauge the mood of the South African Jews at the moment? We were there 2 months ago, and there definitely was an air of despondency. The Jews are upset about the power cuts, the water cuts, BDS, and everything else that's going on.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm a commentator on the pulse of our brothers and sisters in South Africa, but there's a little bit of a political frustration in South Africa these days about where the country is going. I know other countries that sometimes have those kind of moods. Do you? Right, exactly. So there's a mood, but I think that any fair-minded person, if you ask, is South Africa a better place now than it was 30 years ago? Any fair-minded person would say it's better now. That there's more opportunity for people. Certainly, if you look at the economy, it's in a better place. And so, sure, people tend to sometimes be nostalgic. But you know what? If you hear your South African Jewish friends complain, whinge a little bit too much, remind them that El Al flies here 3 times a week. And that Telfed has wonderful programs to help them get settled in Israel. If it's the Sea Point crowd, they can hang out, but we want their kids and their grandchildren, right?
How is the embassy counteracting the apartheid, Israel apartheid week? Bearing in mind that they're referring directly to Israel and South African, comparing to South African apartheid. Shouldn't you in South Africa be the world leaders in dissing it?
Well, number one, I think the quick answer to that question is no, that's a false argument and disrespectful to South Africa and its history. And use another sentence to explain why Israel as a democracy with Arab judges on our Supreme Court, it's totally inappropriate to make that comparison. And then talk about Israel in a whole other way. I don't want to have a long debate about Israel and apartheid. One, because it's wrong. And it's an injustice to the people who suffered during the time of apartheid. 2, I don't want to play that game. I don't want to be in that box. I want to be talking about tomatoes and about culture and about everything else that Israel is.
But that is growing throughout the world.
Well,
and as the base of it in South Africa, shouldn't you be leading the world fight against it? Showing how incorrect such a comparison is.
Well, I hear what you're saying. And our speakers for Israel around the world need the right tools to be able to give that short answer that I gave. And there are different ways to get those tools. I know that there have been different groups that have visited Israel from South Africa, from different backgrounds and ethnicities recently. You get a young black woman from South Africa saying, excuse me, I grew up in Soweto. I'm born free, but my father was in prison. And how can you talk that way? We may think that Israel should be more generous in making peace with the Palestinians, but it's just wrong. I've been to Israel and I saw. But I think that that's not a conversation that I want to make the centerpiece of what we do in South Africa. I don't want to be talking about apartheid. I want to be talking about everything else but. Now, should Israel, in our worldwide PR, public diplomacy, Hasbara efforts, have appropriate answers to that false, angry, mean, mistaken analogy? Yes. But I don't think that the Israeli embassy in Pretoria is the place where I want to be. If I need to debate that issue, I can do it. But as a public diplomacy strategy, the second I talk about, when the elections were going on last year, earlier this year, right? Who chaired the election committee for the 20th Knesset in Israel? Who was the chairman of the Vadat HaBchirot HaMerkazit? Anybody? Justice Jubran, right? When Katsav was convicted and sent to jail, right? Certainly not a moment of great pride for the state of Israel that we had a president who went to jail for rape. But it was a moment of pride that we stood up and put our leaders to be responsible for whether it's for corruption or for violent crime, and other countries might not. But it was also a Christian Arab judge who made that decision. And Knesset, and in high tech, and in business, and in the streets of Tel Aviv during Ramadan, people coming for iftar dinners or sitting by the beach. None of those things were possible in the South Africa that you guys grew up in. None of those things. And so the comparison is disrespectful and is inappropriate. And so you do. And so you do. You tell it in one sentence or two, you're right. And then you move on and you go back to your narrative and tell your story about Israel and South Africa looking forward in 2015.
Two simple questions.
We'll see.
If I may ask the first one. Can you comment on the decision to refuse the black minister access to Israel or as a visa? What's your thinking to that, if you can express that? That's number one. And number two.
Simple questions, he said he was going to ask.
The next question is, knowing what's going on with the BDS and the recent visit of the students, the ANC students, do you think it's true that the ANC offered each 40,000 rand not to come? BDS students?
No, it wasn't the answer. All right, so let's try. Oh, right, that you're at Rolene. Rolene. No, that's what happens when Rolene sits behind you. You get whistle. It's a problem. You're right. So the two different questions. So let's start with the second one. It wasn't the South African ruling party or government, but it was a student union that was part of the BDS movement that tried to bribe these students to not come. Every single one of them said, buzz off. Got on the airplane and came and went home and debated the issues publicly, saying information is power. Not that they became Zionists, nor was it intended that they become, but come and see with your own eyes. Come and interact, come meet young Israelis and young Palestinians. Come learn about high tech and learn about water use. Come learn about yourself. Young South Africans have this challenge of being exposed to the larger world. Why in the world let yourself be locked in one idea? And this program that's being led by different parts of the Jewish community in South Africa and certainly supported by the embassy of bringing more massive success in that it's impacting people's lives and that the way they look at the world. And for us and our very selfish interests, we're going to have more friends and more people who are going to be able to stand in front of an audience, not with an American accent, but a young woman with a South African accent, to tell these stories or to push away misclaims. The Minister of Higher Education, who wasn't given a visa to come to Israel, wasn't given a visa because he's an extreme hater of Israel.